Everyone has heard of Minecraft. It's one of the biggest games in the history of gaming. Released in 2011, Minecraft has been going strong for over 14 years now, and it's still receiving regular updates. Food has played an important role in Minecraft from the beginning. Eating food acts as the game's primary healing mechanic, with different foods healing different amount of hit points. And while the game eventually also added a hunger bar, food continues to restore health as well as keep your character from starving to death. The choices in food items in Minecraft is a bit limited, but there is more variety than you might think. While most food is designed to be eaten only by a single player, the cake is different. Cake is designed to be eaten in slices. As such, multiple players can eat the cake. Added to the game in version 1.2, cake is placed down on the ground or on a table. Players are then able to eat a single slice of cake, changing the cake sprite and restoring several bars of hunger for the player. So we're going to feed our entire party by making some cake at Dakon's Bakehouse. When designing this recipe, I used this screenshot as my inspiration for the cake. The outside of the cake has this dark brown coloring, which does kind of make it look like a yellow cake. When you actually start to eat the cake, you do get to see the inside of it. And here we can see that the cake gets darker on the inside. It becomes a deep brown, almost black, and you can even see a faint band of an even darker color in the middle. While this could mean that the cake is just overbaked, I've decided to interpret this as meaning that our cake is actually chocolate. And personally, I prefer a chocolate cake. But if you want to make a yellow cake, then I'm not going to stop you. That thin black line in the middle tells me that we're actually going to be making two cakes and then layering them with some chocolate ganache in the middle. When deciding on the frosting, it's pretty easy to pick just a simple buttercream. White buttercream is really easy to do, and it's also easy to shape. Now, for the red stuff at the top, I debated on what to do for these. I've seen others make like fruit leathers or gels to try to properly mimic the red squares. But, I don't necessarily want to be 100% literal in my design. And it's very clear that these squares are supposed to resemble slices of fruit. Now, in Minecraft, there is a thorny bush that produces red fruits. And in the real world, there are really only two fruits that seem realistic for this cake: strawberries and raspberries. Since raspberries are the ones that grow on a thorny bush, I've decided to go with raspberries for this cake. So for this recipe, you're going to need 2 cups or 240 grams of cake flour, 2 cups or 396 grams of granulated sugar, 3/4 of a cup or 63 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder, 1 tablespoon or 15 grams of espresso powder. This is optional. I left it out as I just don't have any espresso powder and I was a bit lazy and didn't want to go to the store. If you use espresso powder, it will just enhance the flavor of the cocoa powder and make the cake a little bit darker. It's not going to add a coffee flavor to the cake. 2 teaspoons or 8 grams of baking powder, 1.5 teaspoons or 9 grams of baking soda, 1 teaspoon or 3 grams of salt. Kosher salt is ideal because of the flake size, but I used sea salt and it worked just fine. 1 cup or 227 grams of milk, 2 large eggs, 2 teaspoons or 9.4 grams of vanilla, and 1 cup or 227 grams of boiling water, and then half a cup of oil or applesauce. Now, I used applesauce because it reduces the calories just a little bit, and I personally like how moist and fluffy applesauce can make the cake. However, Applesauce can sometimes add a slightly gummy texture to the cake because you're replacing a fat with sugar, water, and fiber. So if you do decide to use applesauce, I recommend only actually using about maybe a fourth of a cup of applesauce and a fourth of a cup of oil. This should reintroduce fat molecules which bind to the flour and prevent extra gluten from forming. It's the extra formation of gluten bonds that cause this gummy texture. Now we're going to start by preheating our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or about 175 degrees Celsius. Then take a bowl and combine the flour, sugar, cocoa powder, baking soda, salt, and if you're using the espresso powder. Whisk them all together until well combined and set that aside for later. Then grab another bowl or use a stand mixer and combine your milk, eggs, vanilla, boiling water, and either applesauce or oil. Mix the wet ingredients together until fully combined at a low to medium speed if using the stand mixer. Then set that speed to low and start adding all the dry ingredients slowly until everything is fully combined. Be careful not to overmix, as overmixing can also cause the gummy texture I mentioned earlier, as the mixing process can encourage gluten bonds to form. Now, in order to make the cake a proper Minecraft cake, it needs to be square. So I'm taking two 8-inch square pans and coating the bottoms and inner sides with butter. I like to use the wrapper of like a used butter because it's easy to spread and it uses up all that butter residue that's still on the wrapper. Then I add some flour to the pan and just shake it around until it lightly coats the entire pan and sides. This will help to prevent sticking. Pour the batter evenly into each cake pan and place it in the oven for about 30 to 40 minutes. So while the cake is baking, let's start putting our icings together. First up is the chocolate ganache that's going to go between the two cake layers with some raspberry coulis. You're going to need 10 ounces or 283 grams of either semi-sweet or bittersweet chocolate. I used bittersweet. I got the chips, but if you have it in bar form, you're going to want to chop it up a bit just to help it to melt quicker. 1/8 of a teaspoon or 600 milligrams of salt, 1 2/3 cups or 397 grams of heavy cream, 2 tablespoons or 30 grams of water, or some whiskey if you want to be fancy. Then you're going to want to grab 2 bowls. Fill the larger of the 2 bowls with ice. Place the other bowl inside the ice bowl so that it starts to chill. In a medium saucepan, heat the heavy cream to a boil. Add the chocolate and the salt to the chilling bowl and immediately add the boiling cream and water. Stir the mixture. The heat from the cream will quickly melt the chocolate, and the ice chilling the bowl will help to cool the mixture evenly. Stir regularly for 3 to 5 minutes until the mixture starts to thicken. The amount of time it takes will vary depending on the material that your bowl is made out of. Metal will cool quickest, but glass or plastic will still work just fine. Once the mixture has thickened a bit, place it in the fridge and let it continue to cool for about 1 to 2 hours. Stir the mixture every 5 to 10 minutes until it becomes too solid to stir. Grab a piping bag and spoon in the ganache. Pinch it tight to remove all the air bubbles and then clip the tip. Next, we need to make our raspberry coulis. This recipe is exactly the same as the one in my Jingle Jam video. However, you'll also want to set aside about 10 to 12 raspberries for decoration. Now, in case you haven't seen the Jingle Jam video, to make the raspberry filling, you will need 1/3 of a cup or 65 grams of granulated sugar, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, 2 cups or 226 grams of fresh or frozen raspberries, 2 tablespoons of water, and 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. First thing you'll want to do is grab a saucepan and within it combine the sugar and cornstarch. Whisk it all together until it's mixed. Add the raspberries, water, and lemon juice, and stir everything together until the raspberries are coated in sugar. Place the saucepan on your burner and turn it on to a medium heat. Now, do not go above medium because you're going to want to go low and slow with this so that the raspberries dissolve evenly and the sugars have enough time to break down properly. Just keep stirring it regularly. It's going to be a bit rough at first, and you may have to mash a few raspberries, but eventually the filling will all blend together into a sauce. Continue to cook and stir until the sauce is thickened. This usually takes about 2 to 5 minutes, depending on your altitude and the weather. Seriously, weather affects baking. It's nuts. Once thickened, place your sauce into a heat-proof container. Now, I spread mine out into 2 containers. I did this because if the liquid is a little too thick, the top can cool faster than the middle and create some texture inconsistencies. So to avoid this, I'm spreading the filling out and I'm making it thinner so that it cools faster and more evenly. Then just put it in the fridge and chill for at least 2 hours, if not overnight. Once chilled, place the coulis into a piping bag and squeeze out any air bubbles, but wait until it's time to actually use the bag before cutting the bottom of the piping bag, as this coulis can be a bit runny and a little messy. And finally, we need the buttercream frosting for the top of the cake. For this recipe, we're going to need 1 cup or 237 grams of unsalted butter, softened, 4 cups or 531 grams of confectioner's sugar, also known as powdered sugar, 3 teaspoons or 15 milliliters of vanilla extract, 4 tablespoons or 59 milliliters of milk. Now, you may also need some purple food coloring. We'll go over what to do with that in just a second. Place the butter into a stand mixer and stir it until the butter is properly creamy. Add in the sugar, vanilla, and milk, and continue to stir until the mixture is completely blended and creamy. You want the frosting to be white, and depending on the color of your butter, it may have a yellow tint to it. If that happens, add purple food coloring 1 drop at a time until the yellow fades and becomes white. Now, I was pretty lucky and I didn't need to add any purple food coloring as the butter that I used is rather pale. So paler butter will produce a more white buttercream. Place the buttercream in the fridge for about 1 to 2 hours to chill. Once chilled, grab a large spoon and fill the piping bag with the buttercream. Squeeze out the air bubbles, cut the tip to allow for a large amount of buttercream to be piped out, and place it with all of your other piping bags. Once the buttercream, ganache, and the coulis are in the fridge cooling, it will likely be time to check on the cake. Use a toothpick to poke the center and make sure no residue comes back. If the toothpick is clean, the cake is done. Let the cakes cool for about 5 to 10 minutes in the cake pan. This will help the cake crusts to cool down a bit and to get harder, freeing them from the pan and making it easier for you to get them out. If they do stick a little, you can always take like a butter knife and run it gently along the edges of the cake and maybe slightly under the cake as well, just to kind of disconnect it from the bottom. But be very, very careful not to break any of the cake. Flip the cakes onto a wire rack and let them continue to cool for about 1 to 2 hours. Any residual heat can melt the buttercream and the ganache, and that is not what we want. Once cool, grab all 3 of your piping bags. If you have a cake stand turntable, I recommend using that. Otherwise, put it on top of a cutting board or something else that you can easily adjust. Place down the first cake, then pipe some chocolate ganache across the top. I have this handy icing spatula, which I'll have a link for in the description, but you can use a knife or a regular spatula also. This does not need to be pretty. You just want to smooth out a single even layer of chocolate across the top of the cake. Then you're going to want to pipe a wall of chocolate ganache along the top edge of the cake. This will trap the raspberry coulis layer that we're adding next. Grab the raspberry coulis bag and cut the tip of the piping bag as it's time to use it. Spread the mixture out over the top of the cake. You want to put on enough to give yourself a thick layer of raspberry coulis, but not enough that it's spilling out over the chocolate barrier that you made. You should have leftover coulis. Save it. Take the second cake and place that on top of the first cake. Press down firmly but gently, and it's fine if the chocolate squeezes out a little bit of the sides. It's actually something that you want. What we want to do next is called crumbing the cake. You put a thin layer of icing along the side to gather up any crumbs and make the sides just less crumbly. Now, my ganache didn't squeeze out so much, so I actually have to add a little bit more ganache along the sides. If your ganache oozed out, then you don't need to take this extra step like I did. You can use the same icing spatula from earlier, but if you have one of those little scraping style spatulas, those work really well too. Run it along the edge of the cake, smoothing out the icing and spreading a thin layer across the entire cake side. Repeat this on all 4 sides of the cake until it is fully crumbed. Next, take the buttercream and pipe along the edges, giving yourself a little wall. Then place some more in the middle and use the icing spatula to just smooth out the top. Once the top is finished, pipe out more buttercream along the sides. You're going to want to go about to the halfway point, completely covering the top cake and the chocolate ganache line with buttercream. Use the icing spatula to smooth out the buttercream, and don't worry if it's a little messy, we're going to clean it up soon. Now make room in your freezer and place your cake in the freezer. You're going to want to let it stay in the freezer for about 30 minutes. Take the cake out and you can trim a little bit of the messy buttercream with a sharp knife. Now, if the buttercream struggles to come off and it leaves a lot of residue, put it back in the freezer for about 5 to 10 minutes more. What we're doing here is we're trying to get that buttercream nice and frozen so that it comes off smoothly and easily from the cake without leaving a lot of mess. Now, you'll notice that I didn't put my cake back in the freezer as I was running late and I was in a hurry and I didn't take the time that was needed to properly cool the icing. So learn from my mistakes and let your icing cool enough. Once the buttercream icing has straight, clean lines along the sides, you can then measure out your crenellation markers and then cut them out with your same little sharp knife. Again, if properly chilled, they should just pop right off with a good scrape from the knife blade. You can always put the cake back in the freezer, but try not to do this too much, as constantly freezing and thawing your cake will alter the cake's texture. Once all 4 sides have been cut to properly represent the drip of the Minecraft cake, you can then turn your attention to the top. Cut out several squares in the top of the buttercream for the fruit cutouts. Make sure to do a large one in the center, and the others can just be randomly distributed as you see fit. Grab your piping bag of raspberry coulis and fill each cutout with a dab of the coulis. Use the icing spatula to just even everything out. At this point, the cake should look exactly like the Minecraft cake. Now, if you want to stop here, that's fine. But I went one more step and I just added some raspberries on top of each of the coulis spots, just adding a little bit of realism to the design. And here it is, one Minecraft cake, big enough for your entire party to enjoy. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss out on all the tasty treats we make here at Dakon's Bakehouse. All right.
Okay.
And so here we go. We've got our Minecraft cake. It's a bit dense. It's a little spongy, but good. The flavor is great. The texture is interesting. So the texture of the cake is, it's a little, how do I describe it? That's very distracting. So the cake definitely has a dense feel to it, especially as you cut it. It feels a little elastic, but it does fall apart real nicely as you eat it. It is springy. It's very moist, despite the slight elasticy texture. Now that also may be the fact that this is still kind of cold. I did just take it out of the freezer, so you want to give it some time to warm up a bit. But yeah, I highly recommend making this yourself because it's got a very rich chocolatey flavor, but the chocolate isn't overpowering, especially considering that you've got that chocolate ganache in the middle. You'd think that there could be a little bit too much chocolate, but the raspberry kind of cuts that chocolate real nicely. And then the vanilla buttercream also works pretty well for it, kind of making it not feel quite as chocolatey. So this is a pretty good cake. Definitely recommend it.